So I hope everybody is all right, coming down from the Christmas highs. And there's four things I want to talk to you about today. First of all, according to numbers coming out from Mastercard, this year's holiday spending is up 8.5% compared to last year. Now, if you wanted an accurate metric to show you how much inflation is really at right now, just look at these numbers. You don't need the CPI, the PPI, the TTI, the QQQ, the QEI, none of this bullshit that manipulates data. Just look at how much motherfuckers are spending. Basically 8.5%. And that's just without even real estate or the stock market. So if you want an honest opinion on how much inflation is right now, this is a pretty rough estimate as where we are on the lower end. It's pretty much like they say, certain things can't be bought with money, but they can definitely be bought with MasterCard. Now, there are some news coming out from the Biden administration. Essentially, they're saying, well, the Build Back Better isn't dead yet. We can still pull through and make it across the finish line. Now, obviously, you have to understand what it means. When Kamala Harris says it, she means they'll have to make some concessions. They have to give some stuff up. I think if they manage to put it across the finish line, it's going to be a pure PR effort just to say that they did it. The actual factuals will be as follows. It will be an extremely watered down plan with no substance because the amount of concessions they'll have to make to accommodate everybody, to please everybody, essentially, it's going to be like that old joke, what's a donkey? A donkey is a horse planted by a government. Essentially, if you let the government plan a horse bottom to top, you're going to get a donkey. This is essentially what's happening with the Build Back Better. I think we should rename it to Don't Build Back Worse, at least at the very least. Some news coming out from China. So China is currently coming out with new regulation about listing of Chinese companies on foreign stock exchanges. Finally, some clarity. And the problem is, these rules can be summed up in a single sentence, basically saying, well, just ask us every time you want to go and we'll tell you. Essentially, China just came out with a bunch of convoluted, unclear, and not so objective rules, basically saying, well, we have the complete prerogative to, decide whatever the fuck we want for every specific company, which is not that different than what they have right now. See what happened with Didi is actually a very good example. So I think China is actually, scoring an own goal here, and I'll explain why. People seem to think that China is progressing towards better regulating their market because it's kind of a natural progression. Well, if you want to progress towards better regulation, you kind of want to get to a place where instead of you making a decision for every single company, you had a set of rules instead of an authoritarian decision-making process where you ask a question, you get an answer, and then you can move forward. There's a clear set of rules that speed up the process. It actually makes it more efficient, cheaper, and faster to get shit done when you have clear rules. But instead of going towards that, China is moving away from the rules that they got, essentially going to a place where there are no rules and you have to ask a question every time it's like Shawshank Redemption. You have to ask permission to pee at this point. What's next? I think they're making a huge mistake. The other thing is they also came out and said, well, we're not saying that the VIEs, the variable interest entities, are illegal. We will, though, say that they will be illegal if we decide so on a case-by-case basis. So essentially, more uncertainty from China. Great. That's all. Exactly what we needed. A huge shout out to the Turkish lira. A prime example of what happens when you let inflation basically go berserk. So inflation in Turkey next year is about to be 30%. Really good example of what's happening to the economy when you let that happen. You're looking at about 25% this year, 30% by the Q1 of next year. Turkey is basically falling apart like a shish kebab in Khabib Nurmagomedov's party. I mean, it ain't two ways about it. The thing is that it actually spiked almost 50% over just the past few weeks, because what essentially happened is that the Turkish government, instead of basically increasing interest rates to battle inflation, they decided to do nothing. And instead of handling the problem, they just said, hey, well, here's some adrenaline. Basically, they said, well, we'll cover any forex losses you guys get as investors in the Turkish lira. Basically, when they said that, there's a huge cost to that. Just last week, they paid $8 billion per week just to keep that promise. You just gave an adrenaline shot to the arm, and essentially the patient still is bleeding out. So you haven't treated the bleeding, you just gave him an adrenaline shot. So what ended up happening is now we're back to the same place we were before this artificial intervention. Back down 35% from the actual value of the Turkish lira before this whole mess started. So it didn't work because artificially maintaining currency is never a viable option. It's a short-term solution if you want to spike it up a little, and they failed again. It just cost them $8 billion per week. Um, and this should be like a stark warning to the U.S. What will happen if you let inflation go rampant? You know, I think it's kind of scary to think how fast things can fall apart. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you tomorrow.